Also over at BangTheBook.com, check out that sportsbook review section, particularly that review for DSI Sportsbook. If you sign up over at DSI using the promo code BTB and the number 25, you get a $25 free bet just for signing up, 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino as well. Low rollover on that sportsbook bonus, one of the lowest I've seen in the industry. So if you're looking for a new shop here as we start to get closer to all the major sports going on, we'll have college basketball here in a few weeks as well. You want to check out DSI Sportsbook and see if that's a good fit. Two guests coming your way here today. The first, Mr. Joseph Everett from NFL Draft Bible. Joe, how's it going today, man?
Going pretty well. It may have been a chalky week in the NFL, but that's not a bad thing. If you made a few square plays like I did, it ended up okay.
You know, and I'll tell you what, man. I mean, it's very interesting to see one of these weeks. I mean, last week it was pretty much all barking dogs. This week it's all favorites, and I mean, it's not really a big surprise. These things do tend to generally even out a little bit, but man, it's a bloodbath in the Super Contest for those that have been following along with that. I'll write about that tomorrow in my recap article, but that was an epic disaster for a lot of people here this weekend. So, we'll see what happens here on Monday Night Football with the Redskins and the Eagles, and that's where we'll start this segment for today here. Joe, there's always a little bit more of a buzz. There's always a little bit more on the line when you talk about Monday Night Football. When you've got a division rivalry game like we have tonight, there's even more on the line.
Every time these two teams play, I know it's cliche we've got to throw out the record books, but you really do. I mean, it's Steelers, Ravens. Even when that happens, I don't care what the records are. I don't care that Baltimore looks terrible. They're going to bring it up just for that game. So, the real crux of this whole thing, I mean, no Josh Norman really stinks for this rivalry. And, Carson, Pennsylvania, he's going to be on house. The Eagles, they've got their full house offensive line with Lane Johnson back at right tackle. So with the home field advantage, I think the big problems for Washington is that, they've got some nice pass rushers, but this defense just doesn't have teeth. Inside linebackers, they're pretty much liabilities when you want them to do a lot of coverage. Zach Brown still, I believe, freelances way too much, and just Foster's got his limitations. And what makes things worse now, Jonathan Allen, their first-rounder, Lisfranc injury, I think, is what he's got. So it's not only done for the season, but that's going to have to be a rehab that's handled well. That's an injury that can linger. So DJ Swearinger, that's the one guy on this defense you're worried about coming up and tagging you. But outside of that, look for big day out of Zach Ertz, Aguilar, Jeffrey, you name it. This is a beatable secondary and a banged-up defense, really. Not too many premier matchups. I'm really curious. Lane Johnson back. I do think he's one heck of a tackle. So watching him lined up against Kerrigan and Smith is going to be nice. But the other side of the ball, the Redskins, I think they will be able to score. It's all about just getting time in the pocket for Kirk Cousins, which Fletcher Cox, Tim Jernigan, they're playing exceptionally well. I mean, if people want explanations of why Philly's got the record they got, that interior pass rush, that presence, one of the worst things you can do to a quarterback is put pressure directly in his face from those B gaps. It could be a nightmare for Cousins if they don't figure those two out. If Redskins are going to make a difference, I'd look for Josh Doxson. I probably bored the listeners last time we talked about the Redskins, but I still think this kid can play, and anybody that remembers him from TCU knows what I'm talking about. There is big playability from this kid, so I think he'd have to factor in. Ronald Darby might be back. I mean, I don't have an official word on him, but limited in practice. I've got to think they're going to put him out there that he'll play. I don't know where he's at with that ankle. But you got to think Bill Callahan, Jay Gruden, if Darby's out there, they'll want to test him and just get a baseline to where they think Darby's at. And then you'll see plenty of Jordan Reed. But, I would hope, heavy doses of bubbles, lots of little misdirection screens, a lot of running back usage here because the Philly's also a little dinged. Jordan Hicks, Michael Kendricks, both limited all week. I think Jordan Hicks is still struggling with that calf injury. So if he gets out on the field, you might have a little crack in the seal there. But while I think the Redskins are going to score, it's just going to be tough on that other side of the ball. I don't want to say the Eagles are going to score at will, Adam, but boy, I'd expect them to put some points up. And yeah, if there's a premier matchup on the other side of the ball again, I mean, I'm a guy that loves the offensive line, so Trent Williams, seeing where he's at, I think it's a knee injury he's nursing right now. So another guy not at 100%. So what Brandon Graham and Benny Curry, they'll throw rookie Derek Barnett out of Tennessee at him. That's going to be something to watch, because if Trent Williams can't survive this game, Ty Nsekhe's also out there, backup tack, another potential problem for the Redskins. So I don't know, probably a little obvious where I'm leaning, but it's going to be a hard game for the Redskins to come out on top.
This one's really challenging for me, and I would have played Washington in the Super Contest. They would have been my fifth pick over the Colts, who obviously didn't play well against the Jaguars. But I was really worried about the secondary injuries for the Redskins that you touched on a little bit there. Josh Norman is out with that fractured rib. It looked like he was questionable coming into Monday night, but now it was announced here either today or late last night that he wasn't going to play in this one. Bashaud Breeland, he's still dealing with the sprained MCL. So who knows if he'll actually be out there. I don't think that there's been anything definitive on him yet, but I would consider him very doubtful for this one, because the Redskins are a team I wanted to play. They're plus 0.7 yards per play this season, which is generally a pretty good indicator of a team in line for some positive or negative regression. So when I see that number, I'm looking at a Redskins team that I want to back. I'm looking at a Redskins team that should start going in a positive direction here for a win-loss standpoint. Meanwhile, the Eagles just plus 0.2 yards per play, so maybe they should come back to earth a little bit. Maybe they should regress a little bit. But those injuries for Washington were just way too much for me to overlook, and I think there are a lot to overlook here on game day as well. Washington outgained Philadelphia in the first meeting between these two teams by 92 yards, but they lost the turnover battle 4-2, lost the game, and that was one that was closer than the final score would suggest. Eagles had a late defensive score there in that one. So I think it's challenging. I think from a statistical standpoint, you want to play Washington. From a spot standpoint now, with the injuries, you want to look at Philadelphia. Both teams coming in off extra rest. Redskins, I guess they played the 49ers last week, but they came off the bye prior to that, so they're very fresh. Eagles are playing on extra rest after the Thursday night game, and that has been a very profitable play for people this year to back those teams coming off Thursday night games. They've got a very good record against the spread. So, we've seen this one come down. It's in the 5 range now. It was as low as 4. It's kind of coming back up a little bit, I think, here with some public involvement on the Eagles and also some of the injury announcements that have come out. What say you, Joe? Philadelphia -5. If you had to make a play here on this game, what would you be looking at?
I'd lean the side of Philly. I sure don't like a 5 number, but what I really do like is 49 total. I think that's why the over's probably getting juiced. If it may go past 49, I'm not sure about official closing line value here or whatever. But I see Eagles just continuing to score. There's just too many holes on the defense for this matchup, and I agree with you. I was kind of looking for times to play the Redskins, but this is a pick your spot kind of moment. And if I'm going to pick anything here, I do believe in the Washington offense. I think they've got talent. I love Bill Callahan's scheme and Jay Gruden. The two of them have been working together for a while now, so that continuity along the offensive line and as well as all the players there, they're going to find ways to score. So I would be looking at a total, and I know 49 is awful high, but I don't know, a final score of 35-23, worst case 31-20. That's kind of where I'm seeing. So I won't sing "Fly Eagles Fly." I'll be singing "Fly Over Fly" at the end of this one, hopefully.
All right. Well, let's take a look back here at what we've already seen in Week 7, and we're going to start with a couple of teams here in the NFC South, beginning with the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans Saints did not get a whole lot of love here this week. This looked like a number that had over-adjusted a little bit. Green Bay did wind up getting some of its guys back on the offensive line. Still didn't have Aaron Rodgers, but the Packers took a 14-7 lead into halftime here for this game, then got outscored 19-3 in the second half. New Orleans took over the game here a little bit in the second half, and you attribute that to their offensive line play.
Well, this is now I think the second week they've had the same group, and they just showed up, and finally, like you said, second half, they just out-physicaled them. And the biggest difference maker is Teron Armstead. same reason I like Lane Johnson so much. These two came out in the same draft class. Were it not for Teron Armstead's freakish 4.7 140, Lane Johnson would hold the record for the fastest offensive lineman since they started keeping it in 1980s. This guy, Armstead, he's a rare bird, and that kind of talent at left tackle has allowed the rest of the line to just sort of gel and mold right around him. And, that's the athletic ability. I really think this guy could have played tight end, worst case. But, he is big enough, physical enough, and just watching him play, it's the real mirror what he's able to do in pass protection, and that allows Drew Brees to do what he does. But honestly, where Andrus Peat moves back into guard, that's probably a better fit for him. Ramchik's doing okay out there, but what I think, I don't need to tell listeners this offense is clicking, but I would expect to see them run the ball a little bit more. And you talk about lessons you take away from games and just certain things you learn and confidence building things. I think they really have that belief that they can run just about against anybody, and also helps. What the great coaches always say, you got to have a pair and a spare at running back to survive. Well, Ingram and Kamara make a great tandem, and hey, if one of them breaks down, Zach Line, break glass in case of emergency, SMU back. He could do a little bit of everything. So, with the talent they've got, Michael Thomas is still just one of the toughest covers in the league for any corner with what he can do. So, not only can this team score with anybody, yes, they're a favorite in their division. I'd look for maybe a little bit of different offense. Maybe some of these Drew Brees totals might not be in the yardage territory that he's used to, because they're able to really get it done on the ground, kill some clock, and get some solid wins out of the way. I'm not stepping in front of this Saints team. I do know that in the weeks ahead.
It's really special when you get a balanced offense, especially because with a team like New Orleans, if you can run the football, and they had 4.5 yards per carry in this game against Green Bay, Ingram over the century mark, if you can run the football, you can limit exposure on this defense, and that's something that New Orleans really hasn't had. They have had a bad defense, and that's certainly on the front office and the defensive coordinators they've had roll through and that type of thing. But they also didn't have a running game. And as good as Drew Brees is, you're not going to complete all of your passes. You're not going to complete all your third down conversions. You're going to put that defense back on the field, and that's going to be a problem for pretty much any team in the NFL. But now that they've got that running game, it elevates this defense. And yeah, you don't want to take too much away from a game, where they faced Brett Hundley and they got carved up by the run here. Aaron Jones had a huge day for the Packers. But, going forward here with more balance on offense, with a relatively new Reggie Bush type guy and Alvin Kamara that they can use to run the football, that they can use for some swing passes and some other things, all of this stuff improves the Saints' efficiency on offense, which improves the Saints' efficiency on defense. This is a team I really liked coming into the year. I backed them in the first 2 weeks in the Super Contest, but they just played teams that had one elite side of the ball, and they couldn't do anything with them. Now, since then, 4-0 straight up, been good against the number, covered last week when not a whole lot of people expected them to. The Saints are definitely rolling in a positive direction here, and like you said, I think that starts with the development of a running game because of what it also means for the defense.
Yeah, and it's going to make them tougher on the road. There's nothing that travels like a solid running game, and also makes them a little bit different. I think people expected them to struggle on the natural grass, and Drew Brees, when he's outdoors, to heck with that now. You could just hand it off. But I still think Kamara, we haven't even seen the best of him. He's just got some wow plays in his arsenal. And, yeah, I think you're right, though. They did get carved up in the run. The defense, they still have their issues, but the pass rush is coming along. Cam Jordan is playing well, and looking at their next game against Chicago, something tells me Chicago's not going to get 2 defensive touchdowns to make the difference in their next game. I would expect a little bit of a letdown, and Trubisky only completing 4 passes. I'll be very interested to play that Saints side in that game. I see a machine rolling, and they'll be at home for that. They're just going to be a tough customer going forward.
Now, I only went 2-3 in the Super Contest last week, but you sometimes kind of have those watershed moments throughout a handicapping season, and I felt like I had one with my handicap of this New England Patriots-Atlanta Falcons game, and I don't pat myself on the back. I'm not comfortable doing that. I really don't like doing that at all. But in a spot like this, I feel like I read a game perfectly. I read this game, the way that a lot of people probably should have read this game. When you start going against Brady and Belichick, it's something that we don't see. It's something that we're not accustomed to. It's something that we're not used to. And it didn't work out at all for the people that played the Falcons last week. But one of the things that I focused in on, and one of the things that kind of came to fruition again here in this game, is you had this Patriots defense that had been playing so poorly throughout the year. But if you looked at some of the underlying statistics here for this Falcons offense, yeah, they had some big plays, 6.2 yards per play coming into this game. But Matt Ryan wasn't as efficient under Steve Sarkisian as he was under Kyle Shanahan. And you and it's a morning drinking game on Mondays. When we say Kyle Shanahan, if people out there are drinking, they're hammered by lunchtime. But Matt Ryan looks different. This Atlanta offense just looks different. You had a lot of Sarkisian commentary on Twitter last night during this game. You have a lot of people reevaluating what they think about this Atlanta offense. It's just not the same group.
And what's so confusing is that there's a majority of the same players involved here. And that's what's the real head scratcher. But it's bottom line, Sarkisian and Matt Ryan, they are not a good match at all. And what's bizarre to me is that in a game where Stephon Gilmore's not even out there, you've got Malcolm Butler. How Julio only gets 99 yards. I know he was targeted plenty of times, but it's quality of targets. And that TD that he caught last night is the first one on the season through 6 games. That, to me, is a fireable offense. So you look at Cincinnati, they fired Laser. Laser's the new guy. It was Zampese that they canned because he couldn't get the ball to A.J. Green. Well, if this isn't reminiscent of why Julio only has 1 touchdown through 6 games, is just that's beyond me. So one of the best players in the league, regardless of position, and I know there's a lot of listeners that don't want to argue that just because he is that good. I think that you force that issue, and that's Sarkisian's fault. Specifically, this Patriots game too. There was just some things that, like you said, are not good fits with Matt Ryan's game. And just the Falcons in general in the red zone, they're running a jet sweep to Doug Gabriel. You've got 2 of the better running backs as far as tandem goes in the league with Freeman and Coleman. I don't know why they didn't get more touches there. And then the other rep, the one that stands out to me is a bootleg. Matt Ryan's rolling out to the right and throws in the corner to Julio, and it's not a bad throw by Matt Ryan, but you're taking him out of his comfort zone. You're not playing to your player's strengths. It's just it's square peg, round hole yet again here. And I think the only thing that calculated that Sarkisian did yesterday was move his butt up to the booth so that the cameras couldn't find him through that smoke screen. That was brilliant. I will give him that. But it's just, I think it's just so unfortunate, man, that last year's Falcon cover machine that we knew and loved is now officially dead.
Well, I mean, that cover machine kind of moved out to San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan going out there, at least up until this week when the 49ers, I mean, they ran out of gas. They were in a terrible spot. I'm really not overly surprised that happened. But, I mean, Kyle Shanahan was a guy. And again, I will talk about this point until I'm blue in the face and until listeners mute me when I'm talking about Kyle Shanahan. But the most underrated element of that guy's skill set as a head coach, and you alluded to this with Julio Jones not getting the football enough, is that this is a dude that got guys open. And you've got a quarterback in Matt Ryan who can stand there and sling it a little bit. He's going to throw it to an open guy. And Kyle Shanahan got everybody open. I mean, he turned, Taylor Gabriel, a guy who he had in Cleveland, into like a 3-week must-roster kind of DFS player last year just because he's able to break down defenses. He's able to see those soft spots in the coverage and get guys open. And Sarkisian just doesn't seem to have that element to him right now. And, Matty Ice is a good quarterback. He's a guy that's had a lot of success. But last year was that breakout season for him. That second year with Shanahan, career low in interceptions, career high in completion percentage, career high in touchdowns. And you take that away and you kind of regress him back to what he was. And you've got this slightly above average Falcons defense. You've got these above average skill players. But if you don't have a quarterback playing above average, then this is what you get. You run into a Falcons team that is a disappointing 3-3, and I'm kind of curious to see where they go from here, because as much as I like Devontae Freeman, as much as I like Tevin Coleman, as much as I think they should use Coleman a little bit more as a pass catcher out of the backfield, it's up to Matt Ryan to make this offense hum, and Sarkisian's not putting him in the best position to do that. So I guess the flip side of this coin then is, how do we evaluate this performance for New England's defense? I mean, are they back? Are they back to what they were last year when they led the league in points allowed? Or was this a case where the Falcons just don't have the right things going on offense, and maybe we get a little bit of opportunity to look at an overvalued Patriots defense here going forward?
I think there were some good signs for the Patriots, and specifically in the secondary, the Batamosi, who got in there and played some really good reps for him. He probably will have earned himself an even more significant role, and depending on where Gilmore's at. But you factor that in once they get a veteran like Stephon back in there. There's definitely improvements made on the back half, but I'd say in the first half I didn't see enough pass rush. They still, I think this whole group on defense for the Patriots is lacking in team speed. And that's it's still evident. And they made some second-half adjustments where Sarkisian made little, and I think finally really got in that backfield. Trey Flowers is doing some good stuff, but it's Trey Flowers and a bunch of guys, and I still viewed Flowers as kind of a marginal player. But still, that's going to be an issue against a team with a solid front five and a really good scheme. I think that they'll show their true selves. So I remain skeptical about the Pats D, and I still just look at some wasted opportunities by the Falcons. And one of our favorite terms on the show, and it doesn't matter what sport it is, you knew regression was coming from Matt Ryan, but it really hit hard. I didn't expect to see this big a drop-off to where I'm even wondering if it's just Sarkisian. Is it just the changeover? Is, like you said, Matt Ryan really had to do some self-searching, make some adjustments, and come back out there and try and get right. But I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, Sarkisian has to it's really shocking that this is the team that comes off the bye with 2 straight losses. They are in a bad world that can't get right.
Falcons 4.5-point favorites this week against the Jets. And again, I mean, I go ahead and drink because I'm going to mention Kyle Shanahan again. But one of the things that I really liked about that hire is that, you had Dan Quinn, who I'm sure has picked up some offensive things along the way, but he's a defensive-minded dude. Former defensive coordinator with Seattle, obviously, he had a lot of success with that. And you would think over time he would really have this Atlanta defense up to an extremely high level. But having an offensive genius like Shanahan was something that really helped that transition for the Falcons. It's something that really allowed them to get to the point that they were at last season. Now you've got Sarkisian, who is not Kyle Shanahan from an offensive standpoint. And is Quinn getting more involved in the offensive side of the ball now? Is it taking some of his focus away from the defense, which, by the way, they've got a first-year defensive coordinator, too, in Marquand Manuel. So that's kind of what I'm sort of wondering here. It's kind of where I'm at is you had the best of both worlds with a defensive-minded head coach in Dan Quinn to help out that side of the ball, an offensive guru in Kyle Shanahan. You had what you needed to have success. And if Steve Sarkisian can't turn this thing around quickly, I'm not sure what direction you go. I mean, in an ideal world, you could go and steal Dowell Loggins, who was, under Shanahan in Cleveland, and that would be something that could really help you there in Atlanta, I think. But, I don't know where you go from here and where you find that guy that can keep this offense playing at a high level while you try to get the defense, up to that similar level. So I really don't know how to approach Atlanta going forward. I think there's too much talent for them to keep playing like this. But again, the coordinator's job, the coach's job, is to put that talent in positions to succeed. That's not happening in Atlanta right now.
Yeah, and it's really a question mark about the whole offensive staff, even behind Sarkisian. Raheem Morris is your wide receivers coach. I just looking at this whole thing, it's kind of a shame, too, that secondary, I feel, was starting to play a lot better. And this is a very young defense that was up and coming, and it's kind of like the bizarre, like you mentioned, last year's situation was so perfect. It's a lot like the bizarro version of this year's LA Rams, where you've got an offensive specialist in McVay. All he needs is someone, a guru, to just handle his defense while he can go sit by the Gatorade cooler and draw up his next script, and that's exactly what he got. So I think, this year Quinn is clearly missing Shanahan, and just the once again continuity that he brought there. He could basically kind of let Kyle handle that side and just really fine-tune things on his brand new defense last season. And he does not have that luxury this year.
Well, speaking of the Rams, the team that they beat across the pond in London last week, the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona Cardinals, a team that we're going to touch on here today because Carson Palmer is out. Now, with Carson Palmer, I mean, look, the drop-off to Drew Stanton at this point in Carson Palmer's career, not really all that significant because Carson Palmer is just not as effective as he used to be. I mean, whether it's an injury thing, whether it's the nerve problems that he's had in his throwing arm, I don't know. But he's just not a guy that can go out there and really sling it all that well. He's very turnover-prone, not particularly mobile in the pocket. So maybe this is a silver lining for the Cardinals. And obviously you never want to see a guy hurt. And with somebody at Carson Palmer's age, who knows what the future may hold for him. But now you go to Drew Stanton, and unfortunately the Cardinals have a bye week to try and figure some of these things out before they take on the upstart 49ers on the road here on November 5th. But you're kind of looking with a glass half full approach here for the Cardinals.
Always looking to find some value, and I don't know the card sides, but definitely some overs. The real problem over here is that it's not the offense. Look at the last 3 games. They've given up 33 or more points. I've said it before in the show. I'll say it again. They miss Calais Campbell, and you don't have to look too much further than Saxonville, who is just racking it up, largely due to him. I think he's leading the team, and just more important than stats, he is just that guy on the field players gravitate to. It just happens naturally, and the Cardinals not having that on that side of the ball, I think that's where they're really missing him. They're just missing that safety Jefferson. It's just not that same Cardinals defense. But, I don't like hearing the commentary that Drew Stanton is terrible. And Adrian Peterson doesn't have it anymore, and they're just doomed. I just don't agree with it, and breaking down Stanton's day after Palmer went down. Sure, he fell down in the pocket. I think one of his first snaps, a little nerves, lost his footing, but a few short passes. I think he took a nice shot down the field. Then there's 40 seconds left in the half. He tries a little too hard, throws a pick to the underneath coverage backer. Yes, that's a regrettable play, but look at the next half. I mean, it's the line. He gets sacked. He hit Kerwin Williams on a big slant, got him in field goal range, and then another holding penalty, a false start. They get behind the chains, and series over again. So I don't know that there was just a ton of mistakes in there for a guy that kind of, that, like I said, break glass in case of emergency. Well, that's Stanton for you, but he's got the experience. I thought he threw some nice balls, and really what happened on the other side is the Rams I think in the fourth quarter, they had a drive that was more than 10 minutes long, went 80 yards. I mean, it was like the ideal drive, a few penalties thrown in, which helped sap that clock even more. So really, that was like a drastically short half that Stanton played. So people don't see any points. They see no numbers. They see the shutout. Stanton's horrible. I think, look a little bit further into it. Difficult situation to be thrown into, and like you mentioned, there's a bye right smack after this injury. If there's a time to get right, lick your wounds, and jump back up. I mean, they've got to go on the road against San Fran, but still, I think they're going to be able to put points up on the board. This is a team that they've been running the same scheme. I believe in coaching, and if you believe in anybody that could get a quarterback up to speed, it's Bruce Arians. So like I mentioned, though, I don't know that I'll be looking for them to cover every game just because of how bad this defense has looked, but I'm definitely going to be tempted to look at some overs, San Fran over, but definitely when they play Houston. That looks like a dead run over to me. So I would argue against anybody that says Stanton's terrible. That's not the reason he's been on the roster for the last 4 or 5 years in Arizona. He's anything but.
16 plays, 80 yards in 10 minutes and 19 seconds was that drive for the Rams. And look, I mean, I know it's the Cardinals. I know Carson Palmer went down, but I think this is a game that illustrates just how good the Los Angeles Rams are. 13 of 19 on third down. And sure, some of those were helped by penalties, but still, this is a team that stayed on the field for 39 minutes in this game. So, for the Cardinals, the problems run deeper than the quarterback position. They run deeper than the head coach as well. And, we'll see if this Palmer injury gives Bruce Arians a pass into the future, or if, the Cardinals actually do decide to go in a different direction. I will say this. The 49ers on November 5th after the bye, and like we said, that bye is very sorely needed. Then a short week turnaround to play the Seattle Seahawks on November 9th. So not really an ideal situation here for the Cardinals. They do have that bye week to get ready for the 49ers, but then after that, quick turnaround, and who knows how Stanton will look there in that first game. But the Cardinals, the problems run very, very deep for the football team. One more team to touch on here in our Week in Review segment, that's the Indianapolis Colts. And, I was pretty happy to wind up getting the Colts in the Super Contest with Leonard Fournette out for Jacksonville. And as it turned out, it didn't matter at all because Jacksonville looked really, really good in this game. The Colts also looked really bad in this game. So, I know that you're going to kind of take a little bit of a mea culpa here yourself with regards to the Colts defense.
I'm not afraid to fess up when I'm dead wrong, and I just don't know how Jacksonville scores that much without Fournette. This is dysfunctionality at its finest. And I just got a little excited over some of our free agent pickups. I like John Simon and what he's done for the team. Just a good all-around versatile veteran type. I liked Sheard, and then drafting Hooker. I mean, that was one of the players that's finally, I might actually buy a Colts jersey and wear it around town for a change. Like, I believe in this kid, and allow it. It was even when Hooker was on the field too. It's just there's too much dysfunction going with this Ted Monachino. 330 yards to Bortles. That's inexcusable. I've been calling for Pagano's job this year, but this just might be the moment. Like during this week, we'll see some heads rolling. A defensive-minded coach, and the defense is the problem. I will have to say it again. Once Malik Hooker left this game, I wanted to cry. It was a bit of a crackback, too. He's chasing Allen Hurns off a broken play and just got swept. The MCL, ACL's torn. So, and after that, it was a free-for-all in the running game, underneath passes, more broken tackles. I think the problem here still is there's no pass rush, and fixing this in a draft isn't going to happen either. I mean, they need for a pass rusher, they need a new left tackle. Costanzo's not it. So it's unfortunate what's happened here because making Bortles look like an NFL quarterback is that's, once again, I still think a fireable offense. I mean, it dates back with Pagano so many things. That punt play with only 3 people on the line of scrimmage and then the rest of the team flanked out wide. That's if he doesn't get fired after that, I don't know. So possibly you're going to see Ted Monachino as a scapegoat here at the least. But, yeah, some heads have to roll, and it's beyond personnel. I mean, in blown assignments, it's just what we're doing with that single high look at safety, 25 yards deep as a center fielder. It's just not working. And, yes, Hooker was athletic enough to do it. Now, they take Hooker out, and if it's Darius Butler or TJ Green, that's just a major problem. Teams are going to pick that apart, and now it's T.Y. Hilton calling out the offensive line publicly. That the team appears also to have mishandled this Andrew Luck injury. We talked about it last time. I didn't expect to see Andrew Luck this season, but not like this. Not with cortisone shots and, we're practicing them now, and then we've had a setback of just even admitting to the setback. I don't understand. But once again, I have to repeat it. Dysfunctionality at its finest here in Indianapolis, and I'm expecting some heads to roll here. And, yeah, if you listeners want to act against them as a fade machine, I'm not going to argue against it. This is really turning into a team that's just kind of progressively getting worse now.
There are 4 teams in the NFL, the Vikings, Redskins, Cowboys, and Saints, and obviously the Redskins played tonight, that have allowed fewer sacks than the Colts allowed in one game on Sunday. And then there are 4 other teams that have allowed 10 sacks. The Colts allowed 10 sacks. Jacoby Brissett was hit 21 times. And That right there should tell you that Andrew Luck's not going to play at all, because if he's got to stand back there and be target practice for somebody, that's like franchise crippling. I mean, it's bad enough that he's already missed as much time as he has, but you cannot bring him back into this environment. And truthfully, the only guy that deserves respect from this Colts team after that performance last weekend, or this past weekend, is Jacoby Brissett for continuing to pick himself up off the turf, getting hit that many times. I mean, kudos to him for that. The fact that he was actually 22 of 37 while basically ducking and diving for his life all game is really, really impressive. And I give this kid a ton of credit. And I don't know if that's something that the Colts can build off of. I just don't know what the leadership situation is like with this team and from the coaching staff. I don't know. But what a disastrous display. And, of course, you can take it the other way, too, and look at Jacksonville and say, okay, you know what? That's a really impressive performance for Jacksonville, who's on a bye here this week, so they can get Fournette healthy and get him back in the fray. But, man, you'd have to be giving me a ton of points to play the Colts in any situation. I mean, look, they're getting double digits basically here next week against Cincinnati. And it's not like Cincinnati's played all that great this season. They've gone through an offensive coordinator change already. They've got some issues with their offense. They've got some concerns on defense because Vontaze Burfict can't behave himself. But Indianapolis is getting 10 in this game, and I think that tells you all that you need to know about the state of the Colts right now.
Yeah, and that Brissett was probably the only quarterback that could have survived. He's mobile enough. He's young enough. He's kind of a big-bodied quarterback. So at least good on Ballard to pick up a quarterback that might survive this horrible offensive line. But I guess the only silver lining and, down the end of the pike here is that it is shaping up to be a really good offensive tackle class. If the Colts aren't at every Oklahoma game looking at Orlando Brown Jr., I'd be shocked, because that's got to be a target for them. Maybe the Mogalinci kid from Notre Dame, but he's not a left. So they definitely have to find an answer at left tackle, work from there. And, it's just I agree with you. Why bring Andrew Luck back to even subject him to any of this? And unfortunately, you're really going to have to handle Brissett with some kid gloves after this season, because if he makes it through this season, I'd actually have to say I'd be shocked, because that's too much of a beating for any quarterback to take.
Well, I know people always have their eyes toward the draft, irrespective of what time it is here in the regular season. But we've gone through 7 games for a lot of teams, 6 for others with the bye weeks, and a lot of people are starting to look ahead to the 2018 NFL Draft. I know you guys are doing that over at NFL Draft Bible.
Oh, absolutely. Every day Justin Gamble, his brand new mock draft, fresh off the presses there. We've got our daily scouting reports. We really focus on the senior class first and then get those underclassmen. We've got them on the back burner, but we try and release them once they get out. And then, like I said, a new prospect every day. You're going to get that. And also our College Gridiron Showcase podcast. We're doing another one Thursday, Friday. So look for that later in the week.
You can follow Joe on Twitter at Joe W. Everett. You can also follow NFL Draft Bible at NFL Draft Bible. Joe, thank you so much for your time, man. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week, bud.
All right, looking forward to it.